What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Hear Me Out, where apparently I'm recording through a Keurig. Today we're going to start by discussing whether or not Curt Schilling deserves to be in the MLB Hall of Fame. We can start with you, Jesse.
Okay,
We'll start with Jesse.
I want to start off by saying Curt Schilling being kept out of the Hall of Fame has nothing to do with his political opinions, because Mariano Rivera, a known person who has the same political opinions, was voted in unanimously 2 years ago. So he's not being kept out for his political opinions. Baseball is also a mostly conservative sport. We know that. Baseball locker rooms are mostly conservatives. It's not his political opinions. It's for other reasons of character issues that go back to his early career, where his Phillies manager called him an ace one day of the week and a jackass the other four. He's not a great person. That's the character flaws argument. It's not his politics. So, moving forward, I think the character argument is BS. I think it's BS because you have people who are KKK affiliated in the Hall of Fame. You have Ty Cobb in the Hall of Fame, who used to wear spikes on his cleats to try to slide into African-American players, other players of that descent. He has multiple fights, racial incidents in bars with African-American players. Keeping Curt out now based on character issues when you have so many vastly more flawed people in the Hall just seems like such a disingenuous argument to me. He never beat anybody that we know of. He never sexually assaulted anybody that we know of. He never did anything criminal that we know of, except hold some very strong, borderline racist, bad opinions.
Is borderline racist.
I mean, he's never actively, used the N-word that we know of or anything like that. So
he didn't beat up people of color. He just, yeah. Go ahead. Carry on.
But my argument for Curt Schilling is based on the stats, where he's at pitchers with his WAR or more. Every single one of them except for Roger Clemens is in the Hall. We know why Roger Clemens is not in the Hall. PED's issue. He's the only pitcher besides Roger with 3,000 strikeouts that's not in the Hall. He has a lower ERA than many of the starting pitchers in the Hall. His win totals are low, but win totals don't really matter anymore because Hall voters aren't really valuing anymore because pitchers winning or losing is not really in their control. He's the greatest playoff pitcher of all time, bar none. I mean, it's pretty unanimous. He is the greatest playoff pitcher of all time. You can't tell the story of the Hall of Fame with the best players through every era, but leave out the greatest postseason performer up from the mound of all time. It's just, I don't know how you can have a Hall of Fame without that, basing it on some ambiguous character clause that's not even well defined.
That's not a bad opening pitch, I guess. But
I get it, pitch.
Oh my god.
Pitch. All right, Keurig, stay out of this one. So I agree that there are many worse people in the Hall of Fame than Curt Schilling, and to say that they get to be in and Curt doesn't because of character, I can see where you're coming from, but here's my opinion of it. I wouldn't vote him in the Hall of Fame because some guys, their careers were good enough to warrant being in the Hall of Fame. Just straight up. They just were that good to be in the Hall of Fame. Some guys are kind of on that fringe. They could make it in. They could not make it in. And I think that's where Curt Schilling is because great postseason performances, correct, but no Cy Youngs. Led the league in strikeouts, twice in his whole career? I mean, his regular season play was never great. Never an ace for a championship team. So he didn't have the bulk of success that you'd be like, oh, Hall of Famer, no doubt. His postseason career is great. Regular season is fine, I guess. So to me, he's a fringe Hall of Fame player. Not a lock, but I don't think his play was bad enough to say he doesn't deserve it. So if the play is fringe, then to me it's natural to look to what else do we have to observe to decide if he gets to be in. And if he is just an absolute, I don't know what words I can say and not get our video demonetized by YouTube, but if he sucks as a person, I think that's totally fair to have to have that be the factor that kind of tilts his seesaw back to not making it. Because to me, this is not a, and I'll make a cross sports reference here, this isn't a Terrell Owens situation where he is one of the most talented football players of all time and one of the most talented wide receivers of all time, and he's being kept out for personality because people don't like him. But that is a crying shame because you couldn't read off 4 wide receivers in the history of the league better than Terrell Owens. And he's not in because of character issues. That's not fair because he deserves it.
His
Curt
character
Schilling's-
issues also don't even come close to Curt Schilling's character issues.
No,
On
not
the
even,
official note, yeah.
not even like close. So that to me is an injustice, and he needs to be in the Hall of Fame. To me, Schilling's reminds me more of, Julian Edelman, who's, postseason wonders alongside Tom Brady are really what kind of puts him in Hall of Fame discussion. But is he real? He's a French Hall of Famer to me too. But Edelman has always been a great guy, great teammate, great person, like consummate pro. Everyone loves Julian Edelman, so I could see him making it.
But here's my issue with that. The moral ambiguity of what you're proposing is their character only matters if they weren't the best in the world at their sport. But then if you're going to make that argument, character doesn't matter at all. I mean, if your character only matters compared to how good you were on the field, then it doesn't matter at all. So he could have been the same person he was the whole time, but if he would have pitched like Pedro Martinez, he'd be in the Hall of Fame. Then why does character matter? But then why does character matter? Why does it matter then?
No, it still does matter. It matters for a lot of reasons. One, being a good person is just important, so you're supposed to be a good person.
Okay. Well, I'm talking about
I
in the
understand
Hall
that has
context.
no bearing on this conversation. It matters because also a lot of those people that we talked about made the Hall of Fame in, like, they played in a different era, but they were also voted into the Hall of Fame in a bit of a different era where we're not as concerned about those things as we are
Ty
now,
Cobb
which-
Ty Cobb was voted in 1936, so
Yeah, so I'm not surprised that they didn't use boxing African Americans in bars as a reason he shouldn't make it in. That's probably why he made it in back then. I'm glad with the progress that we've made. I think society's in a much better spot. But a lot of those character issues that you mentioned in people previously that have made it in, they played a long time ago, they made it in a long time ago. I mean, even 30, 40 years ago is long enough to, those things could be overlooked to make it into the Hall of Fame. Characters held in a higher esteem now. But again, my point is if you're a fringe Hall of Fame player, somebody may say, for every one person who says you should make it in, one person will say you shouldn't make it in. I think it's fair to look at other aspects of your game and your life and your career at that point. He always was kind of a bit of a stain for the MLB because he was just a dick. He just was. He was a douche. Who liked to watch Curt Schilling be a human being? Not that many people. And so I think if the play is fringe and borderline, which it is, then going to character makes sense. Not to say character doesn't matter, right? Like pitching like Pedro Martinez, but being a serial killer is not okay. But if you pitch like Pedro Martinez, you're going to the Hall of Fame regardless of anything else because you're that good.
See,
that's kind
but
of what I am on.
that's my entire problem with it, because if you're going to take a principled stand and say we can't allow racist, homophobic, threatening journalists, bigots into the Hall of Fame, I think that's the nicest word I could say without getting demonetized, into the Hall of Fame, and that is your principled stance, but then you're going to turn around and say, well, unless he pitches like Pedro Martinez, then we'll put him in. Then that's not a principled stance. That's not a principled stance that you're keeping him out. That's just saying, well, we only care if you're fringe, which I'll concede he's not a lock, surefire Hall of Famer. I would concede he's a little bit further away from fringe than the middle. He's more, I mean, 3,000 strikeouts, greatest postseason pitcher. I think that should put him in second or third ballot. But I'll concede he's not a first ballot lock by any stretch. I don't think anybody thought he was going to make it on the first ballot, even his ardent supporters. But my problem is the grandstanding from baseball journalists that is like, we are taking this principled stand against Curt Schilling's homophobic, racist tendencies, but at the same time, and threatening to murder, lynch journalists. Which, side note, if journalists are the one voting you in, threatening to lynch them is probably not the best way to get voted in. But if you're going to take this grandstanding, on a higher level than you stand, but then you're going to turn around and say that, well, unless you pitch really well, then we don't really care. I mean, come on. It's either a character issue or it's you don't like him issue. That's what it is. It's either a character issue or you just don't like him for personal reasons. That's why you're going to keep him out, which is the case for a lot of journalists in the Baseball Writers Association who's doing the voting. Is they just didn't like Curt. He was a dick to them when he was answering their questions. He was rude to them in locker rooms. Now they're not voting for him. Barry Bonds is facing the same resistance. Barry Bonds, I know, has a PEDs. He was really bad person to journalists. So it's about the same thing.
Who are some very recent guys who were inducted into the MLB Hall of Fame who have just objectively bad character? Just crappy guys.
I can't think of any recently.
I can't think of any recent ones either. So, interesting that a lot of the guys who made it in with low character, it was a while ago. Those character...
But on the flip side, who's been kept out in recent years due to character issues?
Curt Schillings.
Okay. Besides Curt Schilling.
Who's the segment over, Jesse? Curt Schilling? Okay,
but if there
so
were other examples, we wouldn't be having this segment right now. It would be a consistent thing.
Listen, I think that I think the character clause is being upheld more stringently nowadays, as it always should have been, but now they're starting to take it more seriously, which you could say is not fair because look at the old guys who made it in and didn't have to be held to that standard. But I'm never a proponent of not making things better now because people before didn't have it better, and that's not fair. We won't get political on that, but you know, that's not how I feel. So to hold it more stringently now, I think is a good thing because they should have always held it more stringently.
So pull them out. Pull them out of the hall. I mean, if your point is that you don't want to honor people like that, then pull those other people out.
I don't know. That's kind of tough. I think it's hard to remove people from the hall. But
it's impossible. There's no system for it. But I'm saying in general, if your opinion, not yours, but people in general, these baseball writers' opinions, is that we don't want to elevate and honor people of this level of character, then let's go take Ty Cobb back out of the Hall of Fame. He's passed away. All his living relatives are passed away. It's not like he's going to throw a fit about it. Pull him out. We don't want to honor him.
Honestly, I would be fine with a guy like that. I would be fine pulling him out of the Hall of Fame. All right. I think the problem is I think there's a lot of expectation in the sports world and with things like Hall of Fame voting and stuff where, excuse me, people expect everyone to be completely void and free of bias. And that's not how it works. I mean, you have a system where human beings vote in other human beings. You're never going to be free of bias. And if you have a guy who vehemently and specifically attacks the people who are responsible for voting him into the Hall of Fame, to me, I don't understand well, it's not fair to want him to be voted in because he was rude. He threatened to murder the people voting for him. And they go, what did he say? No. Send ballot. What the heck was that? I mean, that, to me, it makes total sense. And I am big on living with the consequences of your actions. And if you are going to be just a total douche pontoon to everyone around you, you don't get to throw a fit when people don't like you. And funny enough, he pissed off all the people he needed to piss off to not get into the Hall of Fame. Now he gets to claim, oh, it's because of my political views. But like you said, that's not true because other people with the same politics have made it in.
Mariano Rivera is a really close friend of the former president and used to keep a picture of them together. And he was a unanimous Hall of Famer 2 years ago. Nothing to do with politics.
Nothing to do with politics. So he just sucks as a person. And would people be more willing to overlook it if he was a good player? Yes, because shocker, that's how it works. How many abusers and things like that are still in pro leagues because they're good at their sport? Too many. So it's no shock that if he was really, really good, first ballot Hall of Famer based on play, he'd be in. But he's not, and he sucks. And why the hell would any journalist vote him in when they're constantly peeking out their window to see if he's shown up with a baseball bat?
I mean, that's fair. I get where you're coming from. The last thing I'll just say is, if you're going to grandstand and say that this character clause is important, then it needs to be important period for everything. It doesn't matter how good they were at the sport. Just say you're keeping him out for character. Don't even say he's borderline. Just say you're keeping him out for character. That's the end of it, because it shouldn't matter how good he was if it's a character thing. My second thing is he is going to get in the Hall of Fame eventually. Voters aren't going to vote him in next year. He wanted his name off the ballot. The Veterans Committee in 5 years is going to pick him. The players, former players, we already know are more lenient against, especially because they're older and they're more lenient against character issues. They're going to put him in the Hall of Fame. So he's going to get in eventually. He's just going to have to wait a little bit longer. My point is he shouldn't have to wait that long. I think based on his play, based on his contributions, based on his postseason goatness, I don't know how else I can explain it, I think he should be in. I don't think the character issue, I think it just seems a little disingenuous from MLB to be talking about character now after all the players that are in the Hall and all the history of the MLB.
Yeah, I can appreciate the history. I think it goes out of the window a little bit just because, like I said, they haven't put anyone like that in recently. I think they're doing a better job now. It makes sense to keep him.
There also hasn't been many players like Curt recently, though.
No, thank God.
So I think
he's kind of an era. He's kind of a relic from the '60s.
I think like Josh said, actions have consequences. If he was like an undisputed first ballot kind of guy where you just can't deny his play is just, he belongs there. You know, he's a second, third ballot kind of guy. If you're a piece of garbage, you're going to get treated as such. If you get treated poorly because you treat people poorly, I think you're just reaping what you sow. And I'll never argue against people, you know, facing the consequences of their actions. So I'd keep him out as well.
Thank you, Jacob. Thank you for your insight. I think that you had a lot to add to that episode.
I think Jacob has no idea what he's talking about and should never open his mouth on our episode again.
That being said, let us know what you guys think down in the comments below. Does Curt Schilling belong in the Hall of Fame? Should they overlook this character issues and vote him in? What do you think? With that, though, that'll wrap us up. Thanks for watching. See you next time.